In this session, we have learnt how to make lemon sole goujons with a tartar sauce, with grains of sole, with a creme fraiche sauce. So we're going to first of all take the fish, we're going to cut this down into strips, we're going to then pane it, which is a process I'll talk to you about in a moment. We're going to chill that down. Meanwhile, we'll make our creme fraiche sauce with lots of herbs and acidity, and then we're going to serve those together, having deep fried our goujons. Ingredients, first of all, here we have 150 grams of plain flour, 3 eggs which have just been beaten, 150 grams of dried breadcrumbs, 2 litres of sunflower oil or vegetable oil, with a piece of bread which we're going to use for testing the temperature of the oil, your 4 fillets from your flat fish, some parsley and also some tarragon, a couple of lemons, 300 millilitres of creme fraiche, 2 tablespoons of capers and 2 gherkins. You may have bought your fish as fillets, and perhaps if you have bought them from the fishmonger or from a supermarket, you'll actually find that they will often remove the fillets as 2. So you'd have the top here and then you'd have the base fillets. If you have got that, that's absolutely fine, but you'll be able to see where just to divide these fillets into 2, and you may also need to skin them as well. Once you've done that, that will then be ready for us to create the goujons. Although this is quite a simple dish to look at, we have actually got lots of skills and techniques that we're going to be doing. First of all, we're going to be doing the process of panéing. This is to flour, to egg and to crumb the fish or meat if you're using it. It gives a really lovely crisp exterior to the goujons, and it also will retain all of the moisture inside. So that's going to be one of our skills that we're going to do. We've then got to deep fat fry them. There's obviously lots of rules we need to remember when we're deep fat frying, so we will cover that when we go to do that section. And then lastly, it's going to be about knife skills and balance. We need to create a lovely creme fraiche sauce, which has got finely chopped capers and gherkins in there, really good knife skills on the herbs, and then balance perfectly with acidity and also seasoning that will help to complement the fish that we're serving with it. Ready to divide our fish into the goujons. So I'm just going to take one of the fillets. The main thing with this is uniformity, so that everything is the same size and therefore it will cook at the same rate as well. If your knife is a similar size to this one, it may be worth kind of almost using the width of the blade as your guide to how thick you want the goujons to be. We're going to slice them just on an angle. So if you kind of lay your knife on so that you can see where you're going to be cutting, and I'm going to cut my first one just here. That can then just be placed to the side. Using your knife again, and then you can just bring it up. And you just want to continue to use that knife as a guide. And by having them on the angle, you'll also get some nice long pieces of fish, which look a little bit nicer for presentation. And then you may find just for that last one that you'll actually just keep that at that size. We're going to now repeat with the next pieces of fish, keeping that same size going throughout all 4 fillets. All the goujons are cut now, so I'm just going to take my plate. We're going to place these back onto the plate, and then they are ready for the next stage, which is going to be the pané. But before we do that, we're just going to have a good clean down. Whenever you've done any preparation with fish, it is a really good idea to just completely clear down, ready for your next task. When you're washing your board, I would wash it with cold water first of all. By washing with cold water, you'll get rid of the protein, and then finishing off with hot soapy water, and that should prevent your board smelling at any point. Same thing for your hands as well, cold water first of all, and then just your worktop with some hot soapy water. That allows you to be really nice and clean and tidy for the next task. Now do a process called panéing. This is about crumbing your food. It's a great way to retain crispness on the outside, but the food to stay really nice and moist in the middle. It's a transferable skill. It can be used for lots of different things, such as fish, other fish, or also meats as well. So if we have a look, first of all, we've got some flour here. The order in which we need to go in is the food to go into some flour, dust off all of the excess. Then we're going to go into some egg. And then from the egg, we're going to go into our dried breadcrumbs. Make sure that these ingredients that you've got are in nice big vessels, just so that it's going to be easy to be able to dip the fish into here and be able to remove it out as well. So we spread those out onto plates. The first thing we're going to do is just to season our flour. This is going to help to give some seasoning to the fish as it cooks. So we're going to make sure that we've got a nice amount of salt in there, and also just a little bit of pepper as well. And then you just want to give that a little bit of a mix through, just making sure that it's mixed through all of that flour. Now, the key to this is to make sure that you keep one hand for dry and you keep one hand for wet. So we're going to, first of all, I'm just going to show you one to begin with, and then we'll do a batch of them. So I'm going to dip my goujon into the flour. I'm going to tap off the excess. I'm going to then dip this into the egg. At this stage now, I'm going to use my other hand, and this is going to be the wet hand, is going to be my right hand. Make sure that's got a nice coating. Lift that out, and then onto the crumb. Now I'm going to end up taking my dry hand again and then just dipping the goujons into that crumb, making sure they've got a really nice coating. If you don't keep a dry hand and a wet hand, what tends to happen is you'll end up with your hands becoming panéed as well. So it's worth just trying to remember that as you're making your way through this process. And then we're going to lay those, when we're happy that we've got a nice coating, we're going to lay that onto a wire rack over a roasting tin. And now we're going to have a look at doing 4 or 5 pieces at a time. We've shown you one. It is really important to be able to do this in batches, just so that you're nice and efficient with your time. So I'm going to take 5 or 6 of the goujons. I'm just going to place those into the flour. Just give those a little bit of a run through the flour. If you're doing lots of these, you might want to maybe just put these into a sieve just to shake out the excess. I'm going to now dip these into the egg, just dropping them so that they are just slightly separate from each other. And then we're going to now coat those once they're all nicely coated, returning to my other dry hand, and then just to lift those out into here. And that means that you can get lots done at one time. If you were doing these for a canapé party, or you're doing them for multiple people, this would be an efficient way of doing it. Just make sure on the tray that they are spread out and they're not too close to each other. We do want them just to dry out a little bit as they sit on this tray. So a little bit of a space between each one. And then we can carry on and do one more batch of another kind of 6 goujons. And then we should be all done. I find after a couple of batches that you've got little bits of kind of egg crumb in here. So it's probably a good idea just to remove those out of the way, just to take those out. And if you do find that maybe your crumb's got quite low and you haven't quite got enough depth to it, then maybe just top up with a little bit more crumb, or alternatively, if you need a bit more egg, then do that as well. But just have a little look through and make sure there's no clumpy bits of egg in there, and then we're ready to do another batch. All my ingredients ready in front of me. So I've got my creme fraiche here, gherkins and capers, my lemon, and also the herbs as well. So we're going to start off with the chopping of the capers and also the gherkins. It's really important that you always choose your knife carefully when you're doing a knife skill, and that you're using the correct knife. So just what I would say, because we want to get quite nice fine pieces for this gherkin, I would suggest that we use the smaller knife to begin with to get those kind of intricate cuts, and then we can move on to our chef's knife after that. I'm just going to take some slices from the gherkin. I have just given these a little bit of a rinse just to remove some of the acidity away from these. Once we've done our nice fine chop of these slices, what we then want to do is just to cut into lengths, again nice and close together. And then from each piece we can transfer now to our chef's knife. We can use our rolling chop and we can get those chopped down into nice small pieces. By doing it this way, we should end up with small, even-sized pieces rather than just doing a kind of cross-chop through, which is the method that we're going to choose for the capers. So again, back to the small knife and then the large chef's knife to finish that off. I'm just going to keep going with the remainder of the gherkin and then we can have a look at the chopping down of the capers. You can see that we've got our nice small pieces here, small cubes. I'm just going to take those away from the knife, pop those into a pile. So just move the gherkins to the side of the board and then we can bring the capers over to our board as well. Just to get the capers chopped down, we just need to roughly chop these. They don't need to be really, really fine. It means then that everything we've got in here is just slightly different size. So we're just going to break those down just using a cross-chopping motion. Keep bringing them into the middle. And once you are happy that those are kind of roughly chopped through, we can move those to one side as well. Just pop those next to where the gherkins are. We may not necessarily put all of this in. We'll chop it and then we'll just add it slowly if we don't need to add all of it in because we want to just get that really nice balance. We're going to now just zest the lemons. So first of all, I'm just using a fine grater for this, making sure that when I'm grating, I'm just taking off that outside part, just where the kind of oils are, rather than going into that very bitter flesh. So just a light stroke over the outside of that lemon just to get the zest. We're only using zest because what we don't want to do is to use maybe the juice where it could potentially let down that creme fraiche and make it quite runny. We want something that's going to be of a relatively thick consistency so that we're able to dip those goujons into it. Now, if you didn't have a lemon, you could of course just use a lime if you wanted to. It's just to get that little bit of acidity in. So you can see that I've just taken off the outside part there. Just going to tap that just to get rid of the excess. And then now we've got all of our acidic ingredients, our lemon, our capers and our gherkins ready on our board. And we're going to place these into our creme fraiche. I'm going to now build up the acidity in this creme fraiche. So first of all, I'm going to add in my lemon. I'm going to add in some of the capers and some of the gherkins. And then we can just give that a little bit of a mix and just get you to have a taste of it. Make sure you're happy with the acidity in there. And then once you are, we can also season and then we can start our herb chopping. So I'm just going to add a little bit of salt and also a little bit of pepper in there as well. And we're just going to give this a bit of a mix. I'm going to have a taste and then we'll add some more if we need to. Just make sure it's got a really nice zingy kind of piquancy to it so that it's going to help to complement that fish nicely. If you need a little bit more of anything, just add that in. And then when you're happy with it, give your board a clear down and we're ready to chop the herbs. For the chopping of the parsley, we've got some flat leaf parsley here. So you can identify that being quite different from curly parsley and those kind of quite sharp flat leaves to it. We're just going to take the leaves off the stalks. We don't want to include the stalks in this. They are quite coarse and would be quite hard to digest as well. So just removing those leaves. The amount that you put in here again is completely up to you, what you want to put in there. Just making sure that you can certainly taste that parsley and also the tarragon that we're going to be putting in as well. If you wanted to maybe use some different herbs, you could use something like chives in there as an alternative, or maybe some chervil as an alternative to the tarragon if you wish to. So now that we've got our leaves, what I want to do is just to squeeze these together into a little ball. This is going to help to just break down the leaves, and then we can do a nice cross chop through. So I'm going to just holding that nice and tightly. I'm just going to cut through as fine as I can. That's going to help just to break down the leaves a little bit. And then once we have broken those down, we can then now, using your knife, just use a crossing motion with the knife across the top of the herbs, just breaking those down into nice small pieces. We don't need to go really, really fine with this, but we do need to make sure that it's broken sufficiently. So that will probably be a minute or so of just cross-chopping through. Keep bringing it back into the center, and also just to remove what's on the knife nice and gently so that we can chop all of that right down. Now our parsley is finely chopped. I'm just going to put that to one side. And now we can tackle the tarragon. Our tarragon just here. So we can see that these very kind of long, thin leaves are just sitting on quite a coarse stalk. So going from where the top of that stalk would be, I'm just going to hold the top and then just pull the leaves down to the base, and that will remove those leaves nicely off there. And when you've removed those, if you've still got a few at the top, just pull those the other way. We just need to really make sure that that coarse stalk is not included. Tarragon is quite a strong herb. For some people it can be really too aniseedy. So if you want to, just do a small amount of this into here. You don't have to put a lot, but it does give it a really nice kind of back note to the finished sauce. I'm going to again just squeeze that into a little ball. Just break that down. If tarragon's maybe a herb that you've never used before, just have a little bit of a taste of it, just so that you are kind of aware of how strong it can be. The herb that's quite similar is chervil, and that's another one that will give you that lovely kind of aniseed flavour. Tarragon and fish go perfectly together, and it's often a herb that's kind of matched with fish dishes. So we'll just roughly chop that through. It doesn't need to be really, really fine. And then once we've got all of our herbs ready and on our board, again, we're going to add these in increments into the creme fraiche, just so that we're not putting all of them in and ruining the flavour. So just add small amounts and then keep adding until it fits your taste. Start off just with half of my tarragon and about 2/3 of the parsley, just because it's obviously not as strong a herb as that tarragon. I'm going to give that a good mix. If perhaps you weren't going to be using this within the next kind of half an hour or so, I'd maybe say just leave your herbs out, just so that they keep their freshness. Can have a little bit of a taste. And we're just going to put in a little bit more of the tarragon and a little bit more of that parsley. And then I'm happy with that flavour, and then we can keep that in the fridge until we are ready to serve. The fridge will obviously keep it really nice and cold, and that gives a lovely contrast to the hot goujons that we're going to serve with it. We've got our goujons in the fridge chilling down, and also our tartar sauce as well. So we're ready now to actually start cooking this. We need to talk to you about some really important health and safety when you are deep fat frying, especially doing it within your own home. So what I would say to you first of all is, with regards to the oil, we're using a sunflower or a vegetable oil in here, and you need to just fill the pan about 1/3 full. It doesn't want to be any more than that, because when you start cooking the food, the oil can rise up and can bubble. So 1/3 at the most really that you want to have in there. What we also want to do is to make sure that when we're deep fat frying, you have got a lid nearby. That can then, if it does get out of hand or it does catch fire, you've obviously got that lid near. The other things as well that we've got ready on the side here is I've got a tray just with some kitchen paper. I've also got a piece of bread. Now the piece of bread is what's going to be used to check the temperature of our oil. And I'll explain more about that when we actually start heating it up. But a small piece of bread will help. Alternatively, you may have a probe and we can use that to also take the temperature of the oil as well. So if you have got one of those, it may be useful. And then I've got what's known as a spider, or you could use a slotted spoon. And this is going to be able to lower our food into the oil and also to be able to lift our food out of the oil. The last thing I would just say to you is if you do have a gas stove, be very careful, especially if you've got a tray with paper, that it's not getting near that naked flame, and just making sure that you're just following all of those rules when we go to deep fat fry. We're going to get the oil on and we're going to give that about 5 minutes to heat up, and then we'll chat again about what we're going to be looking for. So in our pan, we've got our oil that's coming about a third of the way up the pan. We just need to be careful because obviously it will bubble as the food goes in. So just making sure that that's nice and low. Nearby, we have a lid. That lid, in case the oil gets out of hand and gets very, very hot. We also have over here a piece of bread. That's going to be for testing the temperature of the oil. Or alternatively, you may have a probe, so you can use either one of these. The last thing is a tray, just with some kitchen paper. And then I've got what's known as a spider, or you could use a slotted spoon. And this is going to be able to lower our food into the oil and also to be able to lift our food out of the oil. My oil has had 5 minutes, so we're actually just going to have a quick look at the temperature. Obviously, everybody's stove is going to differ slightly, so do just keep an eye on this. Don't walk away from the oil at any point. I'm at about 103, 104, and it is just creeping up. So what we will do is I just want to show you an example of just what would happen if we did put the food in at this temperature. So it is too low, but I just want to show you what would happen. So I'm just going to take a piece of bread. We're going to lower it in using the spider. And you can see that when that goes in, there was absolutely no sizzle at all around the food, around that piece of bread. Also, you can see that it's just kind of taking and absorbing quite a lot of that oil, which means that if we cooked our goujons at this temperature, they would also be quite oily. So it is important that we get to the right temperature. So I'm just going to keep testing that until we get to our 190, and I'll show you then what the bread will look like when it goes in at that temperature. Do just be aware that once it does start to increase in heat and it starts to get hotter, you will need to just turn your heat down and regulate it, because it will carry on increasing as you keep it on a very high heat. So we'll just wait another minute or so and then we'll have another test to see how that's looking. I'm just testing the oil again, and we can just see now that it is coming up to our 190 degrees, and it's just gone a little bit over for that. So I'm going to now just lower my heat because I'm happy that it's reached that temperature. I don't want it to keep increasing. And what we're going to now do is the same thing. We're going to take a piece of bread and we're going to lower that in, and you'll already see the difference as that goes into the oil, how it really bubbles around there. And we're looking for this piece of bread to brown in about 20 seconds. If it's browning much quicker than that, then obviously your oil is too hot and you'll just need to take it off the heat and allow it to cool down. But if you're happy that 10 seconds or so, give that a little bit of a turnover. We can see we've got a nice colour on that side as well. And we'll give that another 10 seconds and then we will remove that from the oil. And I am happy that that is the correct temperature. So we've got a lovely golden colour. And so we are ready to now start frying our goujons. And do just be aware you need to fry those quite soon. You're at the right temperature, and so you need to catch it at that perfect point. Very carefully, I'm just going to take some of these goujons onto my spider, and we're going to do about 4 at a time. We're just going to lower those into the oil. And we're going to give those time to become really nice and golden, and in that time also it will cook the fish. So just keep an eye on them as they go in. Now, because we've lowered quite cold food into there, you may find after you've done one batch that you actually want to just turn your heat back up again. So you will probably after each batch just want to recheck your oil and make sure that it is the correct temperature. You can see they're getting a nice golden colour. I'm going to just do a little bit more. They will continue to deepen in their colour when they come out, so be aware of that. And then we'll lift these out nice and carefully, let the excess oil just drain off from there, and then we're going to lower them onto some kitchen paper. And as they get lowered onto the kitchen paper, we can then from a height just do a nice sprinkle of salt. That will help to keep them crisp, and then you can continue to do your next batches. These are my last few goujons that are just coming out now. I'm just checking as these come out that they have got the same colour as the goujons I have already cooked. So just so that we've got a nice even cook across all of them. Just going to give those a second more. Just remembering they will keep colouring as they come out. We're just going to lift these out nice and carefully. And then our last little sprinkling of salt for seasoning and also just to make sure that they stay crisp. And then we need to get plated up as soon as possible. Ready for service, what is really important is to turn that oil off. Try not to move it away from the stove. And then we'll talk later on about how you're going to dispose of this oil or alternatively reuse it as well. So if we come back over to our service plate, making sure that we're getting these served while they're still lovely and hot, I'm going to bring my creme fraiche tartar sauce onto the plate. And then we're going to now just assemble our goujons onto here. As long as you're going to be eating them straight away, you can certainly pile them up. You wouldn't want to pile them up and then leave them because they would go soggy as they just kind of steam each other, but we just want to make sure we get a nice pile of these goujons. And I think you'll probably agree there's not a better plate of food to enjoy. So there's your goujons of sole with your tartar creme fraiche sauce. Let's have a little look at what we're looking for in our finished goujons. So first of all, there should be a small kind of twist in the center of that, just to give it a little bit of height. Also, what we should have on here is a lovely golden color. There may be a little tiny little bit of clumping, maybe of the breadcrumbs, but certainly not too much of the clumping. That would indicate that perhaps the egg wasn't removed, kind of the excess wasn't removed sufficiently before dipping into the crumb. So color-wise, golden as we said. What we want to now do is just have a little look in the middle. So we're just going to break our goujon. And what you should see in there is, first of all, some really lovely moisture. You can see that moisture kind of glistening. And also we can see those flakes forming. Now, if perhaps when you go to look into these, you find that they are still looking very translucent, that will be a sign that they're not cooked. So do just get those into a really hot oven just to continue cooking. If you're unsure with this and it's the first time, I would recommend maybe just doing a little tester before you start frying the rest of your goujons. We're just going to quickly talk to you about how to get rid of this oil. So once it has cooled down, what you want to do is to get a sieve and jug, pass it through the sieve just to catch all the sediment that's at the bottom, and then pour that oil back into your oil container that you had. Now you can reuse that, and especially if you're going to be using it for fish again, you can probably use it for another couple more times. However, if you are going to get rid of that oil, what I would do is just research how you can dispose of this responsibly in the area that you're living in. This session, we have learnt how to make lemon sole goujons with a tartar sauce with creme fraiche. So we've learnt some really useful skills. You've learnt about portioning the fish, also about panning, how to get that lovely crisp exterior with the really moist fish in the centre, balanced perfectly with your creme fraiche sauce, which has got great knife skills and also some really good acidity.